Coming up on today's episode, we're talking about the future of coaching. We're talking about organizational and technological change. All this and more coming up on The Perfect Route. Welcome to the show, podcast listeners and viewers out there. I'm Dr. Bill Sodeman, and I am so pleased to have Devi McFadden with me today. Hello.
Hello. Thank you for having me, Bill. I'm very excited to be here.
And we are thrilled that you are here too. Could you introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. Well, we all know how the world of tech in particular is constantly changing, and I work with leaders in that space to navigate that chaos with clarity and confidence. So I'm an executive coach, and I help leaders to just figure out how they can lead authentically when things around them are always changing, and how to do that in a way that they feel really good about. So that's a bit about me and what I do. Davey McFadden, happy to be here.
That's great. And if people want to reach you, what's a good spot to find on the interwebs?
Oh, my website, kathydavymcfadden.com, and learn all about me there, or you can find me on LinkedIn. I'd be happy to connect. Feel free to DM me or reach out, and happy to chat.
And that's Kathy with a K.
Yes, Kathy with a K.
All righty. Um, so let's start at the beginning. What pulled you into the world of leadership and executive coaching, and how has your perspective on the role of coaching changed?
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And I was reflecting on this question and, how I would want to connect today. And it really reminded me of way back before I actually started coaching. And even though I've supported hundreds of leaders through the years and helped them navigate change with clarity and confidence, it took me back to the point in my career where I was completely burned out. And one day I was so overwhelmed and could barely leave the house. I got to my office about 2 hours late, and my boss was there waiting for me. It's still painful to think about it here, decades later. It was really a hard moment, but that moment forced me to admit that something had to shift. And so eventually, I made a change, and I moved from healthcare at the time to tech. And that's where everything really changed for me. I saw a different type of leadership. I had good leaders in the past, but I saw so many amazing leaders when I moved into this world of tech, authentic, caring leaders who genuinely cared about their people and were producing exceptional results. And so, in that environment, I eventually found my way to coaching, and I realized this is really who I am. This is the work that I'm meant to do. And that was over 10 years ago, and I've been doing it ever since. Um, and my perspective on the role has evolved significantly over that time, um, specifically around the role that we play as a partner. So, as a coach, we partner with our clients. We're not telling them what to do, we're not teaching them. We walk alongside them, and their success is our success. It's really the two of us coming together to create that experience and transformation. So, clients don't hire coaches to fix mundane problems. They want a thought partner. They want someone to help them transform, and that transformation happens where there is that strong partnership. So, being even more deeply in partnership with my clients has been a real learning for me over the years, and where I really try to lean in even more.
Fantastic. And it's that role of trusted advisor that so many coaching clients need. And
Absolutely.
and you're right. People bring coaches like us in because not to fix the small problems, but to fix the big scary issues that they may know that exist and are reluctant to address, or they understand that something may be wrong, but they can't put their finger on it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And those big scary issues that they don't necessarily have another place that they can talk about that with. You can't necessarily talk to your boss about it, or you can't necessarily talk to your peers about it, or your team about it. And your partner or spouse can provide so much help or support, but not necessarily the person to help you navigate it as well. So that trusted thought partner is essential, and that's a basic foundational element as our role of coaches, and it's creating that safe space.
Yes, yes. The safe space is tremendously important. And, one of the big things that I've found is it doesn't happen right away, but
Right.
once it does, it's a glorious thing
Yes.
because, trust is more or less been established, and the client can open up with, with their real feelings.
Exactly.
And, especially when they start to be introspective and consider what is it about their leadership style? What is it about their, do they take things in the workplace too personal, for example?
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, because I'm not a believer in the idea that we leave our personal life in the train or in the car when we come to work. It's that sack of rocks we carry around with us.
Right, right. They're not separate. They definitely intermingle with one another. And that's one of the things that when we look at the definition of coaching, like if I was to go to the International Coach Federation, ICF, and look at their definition of coaching, it's about helping our clients to maximize their potential professionally and personally because they're not separate. And so that's part of my role as a coach is to help people to bring their authentic selves and to be that person that they want to be both professionally and personally. And yeah, those are also things that sometimes people don't have another space to have that conversation. And so as a partner, we are that space for them.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Davey, what are some big trends or areas that are changing in coaching, and how are you identifying and addressing those?
Well, I think it's impossible to talk about trends that are evolving today without talking about AI.
Hmm.
And I think about it from several different perspectives. One is I think about how society is changing as a whole. And I recently attended a conference, and a leader from Salesforce said that 50% of the workforce needs reskilling. Um, that's massive. 50% of the workforce. I mean, if you think back to like when ATMs came in, that was impacting a certain industry and a certain population of the industry, not the entire 50% of the entire workforce. So this is something that we've never dealt with before. Um, but leaders are dealing with it every single day. And so that's the second perspective that I think about it from is how is it impacting my clients? Leaders are not only learning how to navigate AI for themselves, they're also learning how their teams and organizations need to stay ahead of their peers and to be prepared and ready and leading in this space. So these things are happening so quickly, and how do people stay ahead, much less stay abreast while you're going through this transformation of 50% of the workforce? There are ethical questions, there are questions about equality and access, in addition to the foundational questions of, what does this mean in terms of our day to day and the skill sets that we need? So, all of these things require leaders to adapt while leading at a rapid pace. So, personally, I'm working to address it by staying informed and actively participating. This is not a wait and see experience. I think it's important to lean in and participate so that I can be that thought partner with my clients and support the transformation in a useful way. So I'm always learning from my clients. They are wonderful and amazing, and I learn so much from them. But also, I'm taking the responsibility on myself to learn about the security of my own information and my clients' information when it comes to
Mhm.
AI, and to actually use these tools and to bring them into my life and to be intentional and thoughtful about it so that I really stay relevant with my clients and what's going on in their world each and every day.
How do you handle clients who are reluctant or resistant to using AI?
We explore it in terms of their goals and their values and what is it that they want to accomplish. I find that resistance and reluctance is often um, due to some other underlying belief or perception. It could be that there's a lack of understanding and not wanting to feel like, oh, I'm the only one in the room that doesn't know what's happening. And
Um,
so it comes across as resistance or something like that. So we really try and dig deeper to understand what's really going on and to align with the values. If someone wants to be known as a transformational leader, how does that really align with being resistant to AI? So, when you bring the values to the front of the conversation, then often the answers are right there. They're obvious, and it's a natural outcome. So it's understanding, well, what's really underneath it, and how does that align to the values and the beliefs that you want to bring forward in your leadership, and the answers naturally come from that.
that's a really good point about values. Um, because with, so much that we encounter in organizational change, it's a negative response to change is often a mismatch in values between that individual and the organization,
Right,
or the individual and their team.
right.
Especially when the team is gung ho and they're ready to jump in, and we see this with generational issues all the time. We're certainly
Hmm.
seeing generational issues with AI.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah, and for older folks like me, I tend to remind clients that um, they're probably using AI already. They don't know it.
Hmm. Hmm.
They're certainly using it when they search the internet.
Right,
If they're dictating anything into their phone or taking photos with their phone, there's AI in the background
right,
doing
right,
doing something. So, and it's not necessarily, they don't necessarily need to understand the nuts and bolts of what's going on, but understanding the capabilities and limitations of AI in the workplace
right.
is essential.
I agree. The capabilities, limitations, and the impact.
Mhm.
Because it's having a tremendous impact on people's engagement and how they feel about the work that they're doing. We know the massive layoffs and the new roles that are being created. So the impact is also an important thing, and often that ties back to the values. Like, the technology uses so many resources. I found some people are resistant because of that, because of the resources. And it's not a right or wrong thing. It's like, how do we navigate that? How do we have a positive impact? And how do we use the technology responsibly? Because it's not going to go away. We
Yeah.
can't pretend it's not going to be here. It's absolutely here to stay. So how do we make it more efficient, effective, so we're using our resources more wisely? So it's
Uh,
shifting the conversation.
Yeah, that's a good point about AI not going away. And I remember when the dot-com bubble burst, that didn't mean the internet went away.
Right.
Yeah, and AI is not going to go away if the AI bubble bursts, which some pundits believe it's going to happen. I was talking with a colleague today saying that the SaaS stocks are taking a pounding because of
Hmm.
AI.
Hmm.
Um, so that there's that aspect to it, and I think senior leaders may be feeling that they're being coerced or forced into change,
Hmm.
kind of like what they probably saw if they're older, with the internet,
Yeah.
um, and that brings me to thinking about leadership capabilities. What are the most important leadership capabilities your clients are trying to build right now, and how does coaching support that?
That's a great question. And honestly, I don't think the capabilities themselves change that much over time. At least in my experience, they've been pretty consistent. However, the context and how they apply changes.
Mhm.
So a lot of the work that I have done and do is around leadership presence or executive presence and influence. So, like you were saying in the before the bubble burst, before the dot-com bubble burst, leadership and presence and influence were important capabilities. Right now, they're even more important capabilities because it's less about I'm a leader that is really good at doing the tactical stuff. It's much more about I'm a leader that's really good at motivating my team and influencing decision making. So that presence and that influence, they've always been important leadership capabilities. I think they're even more important today, but they're it's a different context and a different time in terms of how they show up for our leaders. And it's how does that capability translate to the problems that we were just talking about? How does that capability translate to reskilling our workforce? How does that capability translate to using these tools ethically? We still need to be able to influence, and we still need to be able to lead and inspire our teams.
Yeah, and there, as you pointed out earlier in our conversation, there's so much change happening in society right now. It's not only technological, there's political and cultural changes that it's a senior executive's time can be spent just on change management.
Right,
Yeah,
right,
and but they've got to lead their organization as well and take care of the strategic and to some degree some of the higher level operational issues that crop up every day. Um, and leadership capability can only expand so much.
right,
You know, it
right.
it it can be really tough for a leader who's already feels like they're at their limit to you know do sports cliche coming up 110%. And
Yeah, and the other thing that I would say is that, and this is relevant to that, reaching that limit is that leaders need to cultivate resilience. You don't have the ability to influence, you don't have the executive presence without that influence or that resilience and that ability to know what it is that you need to be at your best and to sustain that through very challenging and hectic times. So yeah, thank you for bringing that point. Resilience is one of the underlying elements of that executive presence and influence. And I think I'm sure that at every stage in history we've said, oh, it's now more than ever. But yes, it feels like now more than ever that resilience is essential and critical, given the pace that things are moving at right now.
yeah, and I think resilience has been really pushed hard over the last 6 years,
Hmm.
just in terms of some people's capabilities. Certainly, the pandemic pushed us for the organizations that are doing return to office. That
Right,
can be a really tough organizational change, especially if there's a large segment of the workforce that just is not on board,
right,
and
right.
there's plenty of organizations that have seen that.
Hmm.
Um, so speaking of the last 6 years, let's flash forward a few years. What does the future of coaching look like to you?
Oh, that's a great question. I believe that the fundamentals of coaching will be very similar. It will still be a thought partnership, and it'll be a safe space, and it'll be confidential. But I think how it's done and the environment that it's done in will change a lot. I've heard of coaching in virtual reality spaces. When I started my career, Zoom didn't exist, so I wouldn't have thought of coaching online like we do today, and that's the majority
Oh
of
yeah.
my work is, online like this. So I think that the environment, the way that we do it will change, but I think the core of the thought partnership, the relationship, the safe space, the inquiry, the maximizing the individual's potential, I think that will still be in place. I do think that we'll experiment quite a lot in the next few years. There's a lot of conversation right now about AI bots and coach bots and those types of things. They need a lot of work to
Well,
actually be effective, but I don't know that those are going to necessarily stick and land. You see other similar industries like therapy that it's being experimented with there as well, but the tremendous risk that comes along with that as well. So there's the human element that I don't think goes away, that we need that human element, that discernment, that judgment, at least based on the technology that we see today. So I think that's going to stay, but I think the environment and the context of how the services are delivered and how we interact with one another, that will continue to evolve.
Yeah, one thing that AI just hasn't been able to deal with well is context, and
Right.
that's where human beings excel. We
Exactly.
innately understand um, the context of conversations, organizational context, politics. That even with something more advanced like artificial general intelligence, which would be a quantum leap over the AI that we've got now, it would still have to expend a lot of energy and time dealing with context.
Right.
Um,
Right.
so as much of a cliche as it sounds like it, this technology won't affect my industry. I honestly think, and I agree with you that AI won't replace coaches.
Right.
It may help with some initial um, pieces of coaching, like assessments, but even then, you need a human in the loop, as we
Yeah.
call it in AI,
Yeah.
to fully understand and appreciate um, context and to have those live conversations with the client. That I mean, I don't think a client necessarily is going to open up to an AI agent like they would with an actual human being who has compassion
Hmm. Hmm.
and cares in the success and development of their
Yeah.
client.
Yeah. I think it's interesting to see how willingness to interact with the technology is changing, and particularly with the different generations. So for myself, I definitely pause and hesitate before anything goes into a tool or technology, but I know
Yeah.
and work with a lot of people who are much more comfortable with it than I am and who would have those conversations. I think the differentiator, like you said, is the human ability to discern in that context. And so even if you are willing to share at a deeper level, it's also about what you get back. And are you getting the insights and the probing questions that are really creating that transformation, or are you getting rote responses or things that might be pointing you in a direction that you don't feel good about? So I think that even if we are super comfortable with the technology, there's still the barrier of needing that response from a human to really make it effective and to really create the experiences that we do with coaching.
Yeah, because AI is prone to hallucinations,
Yes.
and it can be a doom loop for the
Mhm.
AI where a human coach can self correct
Right.
and take those nonverbal cues and take verbal cues and go, oh, I'm going down a blind alley, or I've assumed something
Right.
that's incorrect. There's a lot of virtues to having the human coaches like us, and we're not going away. Um,
Right.
if speaking of um, changes in the coaching industry, let's say you could redesign coaching from scratch. What would you change? What would you do differently?
Well, I love the coaching profession, and I recognize that it's a relatively new field. I think coaching evolved in the 80s and 90s, and it was kind of coming out of consulting and counseling. Um, and I think at that point it was, well, what do we call this thing? And the term coach was chosen, and I don't know the specifics behind it, but if there was one thing that I would change, it is I would change the term coach, because we all have a perception of a coach. We're in sports as kids and we have a coach, and so we have a lot of familiarity with that term that is different than what we do as leadership and executive coaches,
Mhm.
life coaches, or whatever type of coach you are. The coaching that we do is specific and unique, um, and many have received specific training that helps us to support our clients in a unique way that 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 does not fully that is not fully represented by the term coach. And anyone can say that they're a coach. There's no barrier to using that title. It's not like healthcare where, okay, to say that I'm a physician, I have to be a physician, or I have to have gone through this process, or other industries. Similarly, coaching is still in the formative stages from that perspective, that anyone can use that title. And I don't know that there's an opportunity for us to be able to carve it out, because it is appropriately used in so many other industries and facets of life as well. So if there was something that I would change, it would be to call it something other than coaching, so that it could really be differentiated, so that it really has its own definition that is really clear to our clients and our prospective clients, because sometimes that can get really confusing. Oh, you're a coach. What does that mean? What do you do? How does that work? Versus if
Mhm.
somebody says, I'm a nurse, people know what a nurse does. So I think that taxonomy would be something that I would love to have gone back in time and changed.
Yeah, yeah, me too. Because and I qualify myself as describe in my description as a business and leadership coach, just to try to carve out some level of distinction. And other coaches do that too. There's life coaches, baseball coaches,
Hmm.
wellness and fitness coaches. Um, but coach is a pretty generic noun when it comes down to it.
Right.
Sometimes I use
Right.
trusted advisor, and
Hmm.
that resonates with some people. Um,
Hmm.
and, at least it provides a little more description of the function and the role that I can provide.
Hmm.
Um, but that's interesting. Changing the nomenclature itself would, uh, I don't know that it's a sea change in the industry, but it does um, emphasize, maybe it should emphasize the certification piece, for example,
Right.
to
Right.
differentiate between folks who aren't certified and are just calling themselves coaches. And they may have a lot of qualifications.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
you know, uh, um, calling oneself a doctor doesn't mean that you're a medical doctor, for example.
Right.
Um,
Right.
yeah. Um,
Yeah.
any closing thoughts for us? Any aha moments or big things that you want to give to our listeners and viewers out there in podcast land?
Oh, thanks. Well, I just want to kind of reiterate what we were talking about in terms of the resilience that, things are changing so rapidly right now, and there's so much uncertainty, and really being thoughtful and intentional about how do I make sure I'm taking care of myself so that I can be there to take care of those around me is essential. So
Mm,
whether you do that in your personal life, or you find avenues in your professional life, or you reach out to a coach like you or myself, it's essential, and especially given how quickly things are moving. Industry shifted over decades in the past. Now things are shifting in 1 to 2 years in certain areas, and that's exponential to anything that we've
mm,
ever experienced before. So we have to be physically, emotionally ready to navigate those things. So I encourage everyone who's listening to take a moment and think about how you are taking care of yourself to remain resilient. And if there's any way that we can help you, we would be happy to do that.
yes, yes. Well, Davey McFadden, thanks for providing your perspective and experience as a longtime coach, as
Thank
well
you
as
so
talking
much.
about your career journey. For listeners out there, you can find Davey at Kathy with a K, DaveyMcFadden.com, or just look her up on LinkedIn or Google.
Yes.
Should bring you there through the magic of the algorithm. And you can always reach out to me at n3ed.com. Thanks again, Davey. you're a wonderful guest, and I hope we get
Thank you
a
so
chance
much.
to keep in touch and keep talking. And
Absolutely. I
for
very much enjoyed this. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. And for all the listeners and viewers out there, I hope you get a chance to listen to another episode of The Perfect Route. Take care.